Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad that you were able to join us today. We're going to get started in just a moment. And before we do, if you notice, I threw up a poll and just wanted to ask you to take a minute as we're getting started to fill out and give us your feedback on the poll. Which word or phrase are you tired of? Change, transformation, uncertainty, AI, all of the above. I see you. Where's the none of the above? I'm sorry, but if you want, you can use the chat feature and you can say that. Enter your feedback in there. We love to hear what your thoughts are. Also, if you want, you can use the chat feature to let us know where you're calling in from. We always love to see our community and see how big and wide our girth is and where we're calling in from. So again, if you're just logging in, there is a poll that's open and we'd love your feedback on it. And also enter into the chat where you're calling in from. So I see that we have a lot of interaction. We love our webinars to be so interactive. It makes us feel like we're all sitting in one big room. So with that, the poll is open. Keep participating, and let's just get started. So my name is Kim Heyer. I'm with GP Strategies, and I am your host for today's session. So I'm going to guide you through today's topic, introduce our speakers shortly. But first, let's go over a few housekeeping items. As you all know, we are recording today's session. We always do, and we will be sending a link out to you within the next 24 hours or so with the link to the recording, as well as a copy of today's presentation. So even though everyone's lines are muted, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to use the chat to share your thoughts, or use the raise your hand or Q&A feature if you don't have access to the chat. We do know that some corporations don't, but we want to make sure that everybody is included. Also, for any questions that you have for our wonderful presenters today, can you put them in the Q&A section? That way we're able to monitor them and answer them during the presentation and or save them at the end given time. So, all right, let's get started. If you've joined us before, we're so glad to have you back. And if this is your first session, well, a big welcome goes out to you. So, welcome to today's session on leading through change. And over the next 60 minutes or so, we are going to, pardon me, we're going to go over the, we're going to be going over leading through change during organizational human-centric approach to organizational transformation that prioritizes employees' well-being and connection through the change process. Sorry for that unpreparedness. Shame on me. So with that, I want to introduce you to our presenters today. So we have our practice lead for leadership, and that's Leah Clark. And also we have Dr. Cheryl Jackson, who is our practice lead for organizational design and change management. Welcome, ladies. Sorry for my, oh, sorry.
You're all fine, good. Kim. All good. You are excellent, Kim. Always happy to have you here helping to steer the ship. And oh, look at that. My screen is also not acting properly, Kim. So there may be some gremlins in the system. I have a backup computer standing by, and thank you for that introduction. Much appreciated. I'm Leah Clark, and I am joined by my colleague, Cheryl Jackson. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from. And, you know, we're here to talk about change and transformation And yet we recognize that there's a bit of fatigue creeping in, right? A lot of buzzwords associated with that fatigue. And so we wanted to give everyone just the chance maybe to keep it real for a minute and have a bit of a virtual venting session, if you will, in our poll to ask you which of these words and phrases are you most tired of. And so we can see the poll responses. I think, Kim, we're probably ready to share it with the rest of the group. We'll give it just a moment here. So here we are. Here are the results. 27% of you are saying, I'm just tired of all of it. Uncertainty, 32%, AI, 20%. Now, I cannot promise you that these words aren't going to come up during this session. They will. We recognize that while we are dealing with so much change and transformation and the impact of AI, there's also a little bit of fatigue that is creeping in all of these particular areas. And you're tired of it, even though we're here to talk about it. We all know that change is happening in your organizations. We know that the level of uncertainty and volatility, whether it's from external forces or conditions within your organization, the level of uncertainty is, you could probably all say it with me or put it in the chat, unprecedented. We're not here to share a lot of context about the pace of change or uncertainty or how AI is certainly taking over everything. Bit of an exaggeration, but maybe not. And we're not going to set that stage for you because of what we saw in the poll and even a little bit in the chat. You already know it. You feel it each and every day, and you feel it in your bones, as do we. But we do want to talk today about what we can do to shift the conversation and talk about a human-centric approach to change and uncertainty. But before we dig in, I know, Cheryl, you wanted to set a bit of the context around maybe threading a little bit of a needle around change versus uncertainty, the differences, the overlap. So would love to turn it over to you.
Yeah, we don't want to overlook the idea that change and uncertainty, while connected, truly are two different things. We see significant overlap, but some of you may be very technical and saying, hey, we have to talk about these separately. So we do want to highlight the differences here. So in the first circle, we have change. And change can take many forms. So we can have incremental or disruptive. It can be planned or unexpected. It can also be this transformational change or more of a transactional, tactical type change. So some examples may include some restructuring, adding new technologies, which we're seeing a lot of right now, process improvements, sometimes in alignment with those new technologies, market expansion, or updated policies. We see this intentional drive toward making something different. In circle two, we have uncertainty, and this comes with ambiguity, volatility, risk. It frequently accompanies change, and change often involves uncertainty, but it is slightly different. Some sources may include shifting markets, rapid technological advances, geopolitics, regulations, maybe some internal challenges, things that create some disruption and just uncertainty. And where they intersect here, this overlap is where people really feel the impact of those the most. So we have this fear and doubt, concern, questions come up. People ask, why is this happening to me? And how will this affect me personally? We see doubts. Will this even work? Or can I, do I have the skills to be able to do what I'm experiencing here in terms of change or handle this uncertainty? We've got fears. Will I lose my job? Is a common one when we experience change and just this level of upheaval. Can I succeed here? And individuals respond differently to this type of doubt and fear and questions. Some have resistance to it, while others may actually be kind of excited, enthusiastic about this new level of change. So when we are afraid, when we experience this concern, we're really not experiencing our most intelligent selves. Evolution kind of takes over when we are in this state of fear, and it gives us several behavioral responses. Not that we have complete control over those, but we can make adjustments to move through that. But initially, we either freeze, flee, fight, or this newest response of fawn. So how does that show up in organizations? Well, when people freeze, they tend to do nothing. They ignore the reality around them and just continue to do what they've always done, even if it's out of place and doesn't really fit in with the new direction of the organization. They don't opt into anything new until they absolutely have to. When people are in flight mode, they leave. They often leave for a company that they feel is more stable and in alignment with them. But more often, prior to leaving, they withdraw. They stop contributing over and above. They stop showing up in their full selves. Oftentimes, they withdraw to look for jobs while they're at work. So we see some of that movement in terms of people just kind of checking out. When they fight, they actively resist trying to make that change, and sometimes actually try to tear down the change, sabotaging, having negative conversations with others that are just kind of going against the direction. And they may change very slowly. And then the fawn response, we know this is a trauma response when someone tries to appease the threat by pleasing, accommodating that source of danger. And oftentimes they'll ignore their own needs. And they will remove their own boundaries. And this results in burnout, reduced engagement, and some of those negative impacts, even though they're trying to appease the organization and go for this change. So getting employees into this right frame of mind is truly a first step in order to address any of this change or uncertainty. And we can't prepare our workforce for the future if our workforce is operating from a place of fear. So developing those skills early so that they can manage their own resistance as it approaches is going to be a key factor in getting folks to move through this adoption curve or emotional response curve that we see on the next slide. So whether we're experiencing change or this general state of uncertainty, moving folks through this curve is critical, and it's a very individual process. Not everybody moves through at the same pace. It doesn't take the same steps to move folks through. So we've got to recognize that we're going to have to take an individual approach to helping people move through this, which is going to be critical for ultimate acceptance. Now, one thing I want to note is that we do recognize that not every aspect of what leaders are dealing with follows this exact path. It's not a standard model. Uncertainty isn't always linked to a specific change experienced within an organization. But that said, employees will cycle through this emotional journey during times of uncertainty. We see those same emotional responses being followed. They sometimes have to move through it faster, and it's not guided through a specific change effort and individuals putting those steps in place. But the underlying skills needed, whether large-scale systemic change or an organization-driven change, underlying skills are going to be the same. So what does that look like to support employees in developing these skills and moving them through this journey? I'll turn it back to Leah to talk through some of those things.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. And I'm just keeping an eye on the chat. Jody is saying that the adoption curve reminds you of the stages of grief. I could very much see that in what you're noticing here. And Jose says, just remove fear from our workforce. Jose, from your lips, absolutely love what you're saying here, and wish it was that simple. It's not, though. There are things that we can certainly do, and we want to talk about not just bringing folks along through these emotional phases and helping them to rebound when they are in the throes of really being worn down by change and uncertainty, but to really take a human-centric approach from our perspective means flipping it a little bit. Because if uncertainty is always with us, if we acknowledge, as we did up front, that there is always some sense of uncertainty or change that we're grappling with, then how can we create the conditions where people feel resilient all the time? And what if we built those healthy habits so that that sense of strength and fortitude supported our employees when things were calm and sunny, and supported them during those moments of particular uncertainty, upheaval, or change? So instead of finding ways to help them rally and be resilient and bounce back, we believe that a true human-centric approach is preventative. It's about cultivating certain sources of strength and fortitude for those employees, things that they can do, leaders can do, and organizations can do, so that regardless of what changes, regardless of what uncertainty comes their way, they're in a better position not only to survive, but to thrive. And we often say that culture drives behavior and behavior drives results. And those results are what you see above the ground, much like this tree metaphor here. The things that you see above the ground are things like grit and resilience and adaptability. But we know that just like with a tree, what you see above the ground doesn't tell the full story, right? Because that tree and the strength of that tree really depends entirely on the roots that give it the strength and the stability. And for people, we see those roots as things like human connection, solid coping skills, strong communication with leaders and others in your organization, and care. And if we only focus on those things after the storm hits, while the change in the volatility is in a heightened state, it's really too late. It's about growing those roots before the storm so that regardless of the skies being sunny or stormy, you know that your people, your organization, your leaders are firmly rooted. They might bend, they might sway a little bit, but they won't break. And we really wrestled with what metaphor we could use to bring this to life. And I wanted to do something other than just flat bullets. And I tried to move away from the tree metaphor, but it really worked because it makes the invisible visible. So use this metaphor if it's useful. And if you really just like the bullets and the details, we're going to give that to you as well as we progress through. But we really liked this idea of ensuring that you are creating that sense of rootedness so that regardless of the environment, there is that sense of fortitude and resilience during sunny skies as well as during a storm. Yeah, and Jody is saying she's seen an iceberg as well. Absolutely, absolutely. So love that. So what do we mean by the human side of transformation? Again, it means caring for your people on a daily basis, not just when we want you to transform, not just when we have a massive change that we're hoping you'll get on board with. It's really about each and every day. It sounds simple, but what does that look like? These are 5 areas that we have found are particularly helpful for leaders and organizations to focus on. So we are going to unpack each and every one of those with some speed and some engagement along the way. So the first one is care. And I cheated a little bit here because what we're really talking about is self-care. And I recognize that that is an S and not a C. But when we're talking about self-care, we're talking about starting with the basics, things like sleep and food and movement. It's about putting boundaries in so that you can protect your time and your energy. It's about building in small habits, daily routines that work for you, and it's different for each person. For some, it might be journaling, it might be movement, it might mean tidying a space because that's a habit or a ritual that works for you. Self-care is also about releasing what's out of your control, and there's a lot of it when you're talking about change and uncertainty. It's noticing when those stress triggers pop up and using what we call buffers, maybe physical buffers, spiritual buffers, those things that give you that little bit of a break or an opportunity to reset and recharge. And these simple habits become, I don't want to mix a metaphor because we started with the tree, but it becomes a bit of your anchor in the storm, or again, that sense of rootedness that you can return to, having cultivated these habits during steady moments that you can easily access when you need them as things spike. Now, I live in the leadership development space, so I would be remiss if I didn't talk about what leaders can do as well. First of all, modeling that balance and that resilience, because teams we know will follow what you say even more so than what you do. So sharing your routines, what is it that you do from a self-care perspective, and share that openly. It's also important to respect individuals' boundaries and send the message that their time and their well-being matters, and that self-care is not self-indulgence, but it's really fuel for performance. Folks will say, well, why should we care about this? Or this sounds a little bit too soft. It's that last part that I said, fuel for performance. We want performance. We want contribution to organizations, and this is one of the paths to get there. And then last but not least, and I know Cheryl's going to talk about the org perspective, but from a leader perspective, notice the signals in yourself, and when you're triggered by a particularly challenging moment of change or uncertainty. Also notice it in others and respond with empathy. So Cheryl, what would you say from the org perspective relative to care and self-care?
Yeah, so this is a very individual and personal thing. What is self-care for me might not be self-care for Leah or someone else. But from an organizational perspective, we really want to see companies promoting this culture of well-being. I love how you said that, Leah, that culture drives behavior and behavior drives results. It all starts with a culture, and well-being must be visible and celebrated within that culture. So that includes things like offering the flexible work policies, providing access to wellness resources, enhancing those healthy benefits, and designing supportive environments like creating quiet spaces, maybe providing healthy snacks in the break rooms, and providing mindful spaces where people can go to unwind and step away from those challenges and frustrations of the office area when they can't necessarily pick up and leave. And then encouraging folks to do the same thing remotely from their own homes, encouraging them to have a place to kind of step away from their desk for a while. And by doing these things, organizations send the message that they are truly invested in employee well-being and that they want them to take advantage of those offerings. So many times we say it, but then we're like, where am I supposed to go? Sit in my car in the parking garage? Like, what does that look like for me? But when we provide those things, it says we want you to do this and we're investing in your ability to be able to do that. So here on this slide, we'd like to hear from you. What are your thoughts in the middle of this intense change or general states of uncertainty? What helps you reset and keep moving? Let us know what some of those things are for you in the chat. Big things, little things.
All right. So Jose says optimism communicated from our leaders. David says finding clarity. Would love to know, David, if you have any tactics that work for you that you want to share in the chat. I love what Julia is saying about circles of control. And we talked a little bit about that, right? Releasing as best you can those things that you don't have control over. Ingrid saying communication. Oh, I love Jody's focusing on my why. It's like she skipped ahead in our presentation. So Lorena says, makes comment about storytelling and believe that if others did it, I can. Alone time to recharge. Running in the morning. Okay, yeah, David, thanks for jumping in with the specificity. Sometimes for me, and as I know, Cheryl, we get ready to move through this here, the ritual of maybe making an afternoon cup of coffee, if the intensity of the day gets to be too much, sometimes I find I don't even drink all of it. I think it was just the process, like, as we said, of stepping away and finding that moment and then coming back maybe with a little caffeine, but also a little healthy distance to take on whatever is next flying at me in my particular day.
Yeah, and I find that finding those little moments of joy throughout your day when things just feel so chaotic, I step out and I throw the ball with my dog a little bit, or intentionally, I'm going to go to the mailbox today and just get outside. Some days it's like, have I even stepped outside today? And so do those things that you enjoy and that remind you why you're doing the hard things.
Yeah, my puppy's not bright enough to drop the ball yet, so it winds up being more frustrating than than releasing. All right, let's keep going here.
All right. So as we move through the next of the 5 C's here, we want to share some of the data points to set the context for this next component of communication. We know that when employees are experiencing significant change, trust in leadership really factors into their ability to make it through that change and cope with ongoing uncertainty. And yet, this Gartner study tells us that while 74% of leaders say that they involve employees in creating their change strategy, only 40% of employees actually feel included. So what can be done to mitigate all of this disconnect that we're experiencing to build trust and help people feel informed, included, and aware? The answer to that is our next C in communication.
Yeah. Great.
So in formal change efforts, we do know that communication is a key element here. And when preparing organizations for change readiness and building trust between employees and leaders, communication should be an ongoing and intentional effort that is incorporated into the daily lives and the daily interactions between employees and their teams and the organization and their employees and leaders. So Leah, talk to us through what this looks like from a leader and organization standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I got so excited. I jumped in early, Cheryl. Sorry about that. But I love this topic in particular, leadership communication, and was also excited to see several of you put aspects of communication in the chat. So further reinforcing part of the message that we want to send here. Again, human-centric transformation. What can we do? What can leaders do specifically? Communication is your superpower, one of your superpowers as a leader, being steady, clear, authentic. Mixing formal communication with more casual check-ins and doing that in a way that allows you to listen with empathy, to be, again, authentic and transparent in your communication so that trust can grow. And remember, our advocacy here is for establishing these communication best practices and channels on a regular daily basis so that when those moments of change and uncertainty spike, that trust, that two-way communication, those mechanisms are already in place. And then what I would also say, and one of you put it in the chat, I think it might have been Jody, forgive me if I'm attributing it to you and it was somebody else, but you talked about connecting back to the bigger why. Really, really important for leaders. You know, on a regular basis, it may be a little bit easier to say, here is our purpose, here's what we're working towards. When things are unsteady, when change spikes, it's even more important to ground people, root people back to what it is that you're working towards. It doesn't mean that your path isn't going to change along the way. You may have to pivot and be agile, but if you can hold that larger purpose, it really helps individuals and leaders alike to stay rooted or grounded in what it is that you're working towards. Now, in terms of what organizations can do, really, I would say the key message is to be the signal and not the noise, to be the signal and not the noise. And to do that, you need to establish clear communication channels and manage the message across all of those channels in a way that is consistent so that really trust can beat the rumor mill. If you're not managing the communication appropriately, meaning consistently across those channels, those reliable channels, then the rumor mill will win out. And then tailor the communication to diverse needs. This doesn't mean a personalized communication plan for everyone in your organization, but it does mean being mindful of the diverse needs when you communicate. And you know, Cheryl and I always seek very much to be engaging in the way we present, to bring you some data, some best practices. And I wanted to share here a story that I came across as I was doing some additional research as I do in the leadership space. And one story I came across that I thought related really nicely to this key point was a communication best practice that was done within an organization called Banco Santander, Portugal. It might be Banco. I'm not sure if I'm saying it the right way, but nevertheless, what they did was they created leadership karaoke, carpool karaoke. And so as part of their cultural transformation, they had their leaders participating in this carpool karaoke. And as you might imagine, in this scenario, the leaders talked about not just what was going on in the organization, but they talked about their personal interests and real life situations that they were involved in. And this was a pretty formal organization. I've not been in it, but based on what I understand, pretty, buttoned up financial services. And this worked because what it really did was showcase the human side of their leaders. It sort of broke that hierarchy, and it enabled their leaders to reach out to people in a way that was human and relatable and authentic, so that when those leaders needed to communicate messages that might have been challenging or might have, typically been received with a little bit of reticence or maybe even fear or uncertainty, there was an aspect of human connection and authenticity and transparency about the person and not just the organization and the transformational messages. So really great, I think, story that I wanted to share with you. Again, key thing is the second C, communication. And then the third C is all about connection, which again, wanting to reinforce our key message isn't something that you can conjure up when there is uncertainty and change. It's really about cultivating that ongoing sense of connection with your team members on a regular basis. So leaders cannot, I would say, underestimate the power of connection. And, there is certainly a component of this that is really hardwired into our brain, that sense of, those chemicals that are released when we connect with other people, when we don't feel alone, when we feel supported. And those relationships can offer buffer against stress, and even, help us with our mental, physical, cognitive health. So the third C, connection, really important, not just suddenly trying to magically create connection when things are challenging, but cultivating those relationships of connection during those steady times. And while I get excited about the leader angle of this, I know, Cheryl, you do such a fabulous job also bringing in the org perspective. So would love to hear what you have to say about this.
Thanks. I love the story that you told, that example. And so I want to kind of skip down to that bottom line that I have that I want to highlight to connect that together from this perspective. Trust between employees and their direct managers is really key for connection. And trust is this primary driver of that manager and employee relationship. And on our engagement or sentiment surveys, we frequently see that highly engaged organizations tend to agree or strongly agree to the question around, I trust my manager. And trust, this item, is highly correlated with the relationship item. My manager treats me as an individual with unique interests and needs, indicating that item is a key driver of the trust rating. So do they see me as an individual? Do they care about me personally? Not, I care about all employees. I care about my team. I love you all. I want you to know that you care about me and my well-being. Do I feel that connection with you? And is that building my trust? And the takeaway here is that trust is critical, but it isn't built in a day. It must be nurtured over time and in small moments of connection. That's how we build those relationships. And building this relationship early is key to change readiness. Now, from an organizational standpoint, it doesn't let the organization off the hook. We still need to put things in place to help those individuals build those connections and move through the emotional response curve. People need answers to questions like, what's in it for me? The reason part. How do I get there? Our role part. Who is going to support me along the way? Is our partner piece, and then that path, what skills do I need and how are you going to help me develop that? So during steady state, we need to ask ourselves, do we have a learning culture ready to activate? Is it in place and we can just turn it on in the moments of need? Do we have networks already established to support people through that transition? So things like a change agent network that you can activate, a solid HR team who is ready to be seen as advocates because they've been in that role previously. So many times we have these HR teams that just show up and everyone's kind of scared. HR doesn't come into the room unless something bad has happened. We don't want that to be the case. We want to set them up to serve as this advocate position and seen as a partner in processes early on. We need ERG networks so that folks have some sense of connection with each other. And then building and normalizing these networks during steady state is critical to having them ready to activate when it really counts. People are used to using them. They're used to seeing them, and it doesn't seem like a check the box type activity that something's wrong, now we want you to participate. No, we've always cared about you, and this is just turning it on more heavily because we're experiencing something that needs it.
Love that.
Do you want to go into this one, Leah?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that. I was waiting to see the chat. I thought you were going to tee it up. This one is mine. Thanks for that, Cheryl. So what we would love for you to do is just think about a time of uncertainty that you've been in. Maybe you're in it right now. Maybe there's a particular moment that comes up for you. And we would love to know, did you crave more connection or did you prefer space? Let's take a look at what, and Julia jumped in pretty quickly. She's saying connection. Is it just connection or space? If you could just put that in the chat. Because it hints at something we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. Okay, so Lorena is saying space. We're getting some connection, connection through clarity. Let's take a look. So think about a time, if you haven't participated in this chat yet, maybe you're looking at an email and I want to bring you back to the webinar. Just one simple word in the chat, connection or space. Which is it that you prefer? Because we want to recognize that what we're presenting is certainly some universal best practices, and we're individuals. And so for some people, it's going to be connection, some it's going to be space. Okay, it looks like a lot of people are saying connection. And, you may need different things at different points in time. But it's also good to recognize that not everybody fits into that specific mold of, oh, connection is the thing that you need. Maybe your buffer is a little bit of space and then some distance. So it looks like Mike is threading that needle, connection, but with some space. Okay, so let's move on. And that question that we just asked you hints at something that is coming up, which we'll tie back to in just a moment. But let me cover, as we progress through here, the fourth C, and this is all about coping. Now, while coping is certainly a very individual thing, there are certainly things that you can do to make sure that you are tapping into what works for you, kind of like your inner toolkit for change. It's sort of a backpack, if you will. You can all tell that I love my metaphors. I was an English major, so a lot of creative writing, and I do love my metaphors. But you can think about your individual coping skills as like a backpack or a toolkit for change. And that backpack or toolkit is filled with things like self-awareness, boundaries, support, and certainly rest, which we already covered. Now, it's important to notice how you're doing and protect your energy as needed. Find, again, those buffers to rest and recharge, and shift your mindset so that during those times of challenge, change, or uncertainty, you are willing to be flexible and you're learning to say, what is it that I can take away from this challenge or this moment of uncertainty so that I can get better, stronger, and more resilient. So it's very much about shifting your mindset. Now, I don't want to leave that just with those two bullets. I want to go just a tiny bit deeper when we talk about those coping skills that are more cognitive, that are around thinking. we have offered through some of the discussion today some coping skills that are around doing. We've talked a little bit about, journaling, buffers. We've asked you what, has worked for you in terms of coping skills. So certainly there are actions that you can take. There are things that you can do. We've also talked a little bit about the feeling part of things, right? Recognizing when you are triggered or you have a particular emotion, spending some time to think about what's at the root of that, and then certainly, figuring out what you need to do or can do when you're ready to move yourself to a different place. What I want to spend just a moment about is the cognitive or thinking coping skills that we want to advocate for. And what we're really talking about here is mindset. I know you've probably heard a lot about it, I'm thinking, but it's really about having that growth mindset. So when we are confronted with change or uncertainty, having the capacity, the faculties to reframe those setbacks as learning opportunities. And as leaders, you have a really important role modeling persistence, celebrating effort, not just outcome, right? Core to growth mindset, and showing that challenges are opportunities to learn and grow. So again, using this metaphor of cultivating and building, cultivating these when things are going well, by emphasizing the effort and not just the outcome, by helping people learn from their challenges and their setbacks, and by demonstrating the same in your own, for your own. From an agile mindset perspective, this is about being flexible and adaptable. If we build the muscles of flexibility and adaptability by practicing things like curiosity and experimentation, again, during those sunny skies, then we're more able to be flexible and adaptable when we need to tap into that way of thinking during the storms of uncertainty and volatility. Now, I want to be really clear that this is not about pivoting or being agile in a way that's scattered. It's really about pivoting or being agile in a way that helps you find maybe another way of thinking about or tackling or approaching that larger focused goal that you want to accomplish. So back to what we were saying about that sense of purpose and anchoring back to it, it's about returning to center or focus around the things that matter most, and then being willing to move, to pivot, to get there in perhaps a different way. So growth mindset, that ability to deal with those challenges or setbacks and to persevere. An agile mindset, I can be adaptable, I can be flexible while still moving towards that larger goal. My path just might be a little bit different than what I thought it was going to be. So with that, I think, Cheryl, you're going to talk a little bit while I chatted about individual coping skills. I know that you wanted to come in and talk a little bit about what leaders and the organization can do to help support this fourth of the 5 C's.
Yeah, so similar to self-care, coping is, again, very personal, how we do it and what's going to work for us, what we need. But leaders do play a really important role here in demonstrating those healthy coping behaviors themselves, and then creating space for others to do the same. So if my leader is sending emails super late at night or pinging outside of hours, that's not setting the stage that it's okay for me to take some time off and to set some healthy boundaries. If they're taking their phone on vacation and working every time they're offline, then that's not setting the stage that it's okay for me to unplug. So they may say, no, unplug, step away. I don't want you working, but they're constantly working. It sends mixed messages. So they've got to play a role in demonstrating those. And that can come in many forms. And we've shared some of those, from celebrating efforts and openly sharing their own learning experience and their mistakes. Those are some bullets there too. And then we'll move over to the organization side. So here, the organization can establish this culture and environment that supports leaders and their employees in developing those coping skills and really feeling safe in demonstrating those. Does it fit in with our culture? Is our leadership in support of this? Is our environment set up and organized in such a way that if I engage in these coping behaviors, I'm still going to be considered for promotion. I'm still going to get the stretch assignments. I'm still going to be seen as a relevant and valuable part of this organization? Or do I have to be pulling my hair out and staying late and canceling important home life events in order to be a valuable contributing member? It's up to our organization to set those standards and make sure that our policies are in place, our leaders are aligned, and our culture supports that. So this includes intentionally building a learning or growth mindset culture and focusing on developing capability within their teams. And so those are very similar to what we saw before in demonstrating and establishing a critical culture for that. So let's move on to our next little chat here. Let us know in the chat what is something that a leader or a colleague has done for you personally to help you deal with uncertainty and change. So the organization may set some things in place. Leaders may establish things for everyone, but talk to us, share with us some examples of how you were personally impacted by a colleague or leader helping you deal with your struggles.
Cheryl, do you have a story you want to share here?
Yeah, I do. There's, when we were experiencing some change at a previous organization, lots of turmoil, similar to what we're experiencing now with the economy. I had a friend who took me out to lunch and said, let's just get out and chat. We got away from the hustle and bustle. We talked about family. And then she gave me an opportunity to just vent and share my fears and frustrations in a safe environment that was away from the workplace, which was really meaningful for me because it let me know that I was the one that she was here to listen to. And she went out of her way, took that extra effort to give me a safe space to chat and visit and also get away from it for a minute and just talk about family life and what was going on at home. And that really helped to serve as a bit of a reset during that really tough time.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. And similar to some of what we're seeing in the chat, a colleague shared they were feeling the same way and it helped. It seems as though a lot is around that key aspect of communication and connection that we talked about, grabbing a cup of coffee. Tracy, I'd be right there along with you. I like my coffee, so we'd be connecting over that, share what's happening, give info that I didn't have, explain how I would be affected by the change and how I would not. So, very similar in terms of that human need for transparency and clarity and the allaying of the fears that Cheryl, you did such a nice job of setting up early in our session. So would just love to know if there's something that personally worked for you, maybe that somebody did to help you deal with uncertainty or change. Please feel free to go ahead and put that in the chat. And you'll notice as we head into the fifth C, that word personally is highlighted. And I asked that question a little while ago about, do you need connection or do you need space? Because our fifth C is customize. Because, we know that while there are certain aspects of how we feel about change and uncertainty that may be universal, the fact is that each individual needs differing needs of connection, needs to be communicated to in different ways, may have coping skills that don't involve caffeine or, a family pet. And so being able to understand what is important to each one of your team members, how they like to connect with you, how they like to communicate is a really critical part, not just of being a strong leader during unsteady times, but of being a strong leader during the times that are sunny and calm and when things are going particularly well. When we say individualized, we are not suggesting a personalized change plan or mapped out messages for each and every member of your team. Again, what we're talking about is tuning into the human beings on your team and understanding what they need, how they like to connect, how they like to communicate, what buffers and distance maybe look like for them, and then using what you know of them in your ongoing conversations. What's important to them? How do they like to keep in touch? Practicing this along the way as a leader. So when you need that shorthand, when you need to quickly communicate during a moment, maybe even of crisis, you already understand what it is that they need from you so that you can get them at their best, so that you can allay their concerns and their fears. So this is very much about practicing it along the way and building that foundation or those roots so you're ready when the change comes. So human-centric, as the bottom says, doesn't mean treating everyone the same way. A truly human-centric approach is individualized and really involves getting to know the people on your team and the different aspects of coping, communication, connection, and care, and what works for them. And I know, Cheryl, you felt very strongly about, we want to be clear with the webinar participants about what we mean by customize. What is it and what is it not? So would love to turn it over to you to really underline this point for us.
Yeah, I feel like so many times people are like, it's so much effort to have to customize. And you touched on it really well here. So I'll breeze through it. But when we talk about customizing, it can feel overwhelming. And we don't need to customize messaging to every single individual's need. That would be impossible. But customizing is about showing empathy to individual needs, understanding your people, and incorporating those diverse needs and perspectives into messaging, recognizing that those perspectives exist. So don't be nervous when you hear the word customize, thinking it's too difficult or time consuming. That's the last thing we want, is for you to just throw it out. But sometimes it's just those small adjustments that need to be made to highlight specific talking points or benefits, or offering messages through a number of delivery vehicles, recognizing that not everyone receives information in the same way, and incorporating all of these different perspectives into your approach and messaging is really what we want the takeaway to be from this customizing element.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
I love realistic about it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think folks are appreciating that. I can see some of the comments. You're probably seeing that as well, Cheryl. I'm sure you saw that last comment. Yeah. And I love what David was saying. In a previous organization, my manager helped me realize struggling was normal. He would say, remember, don't let great get in the way of good. I've had folks say to me, don't polish the stone until it cracks, right? So at some point, being able to say that you're making that incremental progress and you're getting better with your effort is such a core message here. Sorry, Cheryl, I didn't know if you wanted to share something else as I jumped in to read the chat.
Nope, that's it. I think we're ready for the takeaways.
All right, ready for the takeaways. Here we go. So change and uncertainty fuel that fear of the unknown, and leaders and organizations have a role in easing it, right? A human-centric approach, easing that fear, creating that rootedness during steady times so that when the disruption arrives, when the uncertainty and the change spikes, you already have those tactics, those communication channels, those relationships in place. We believe that care, communication, connecting, and coping are those core elements of a human-centric approach. And as we've just underlined with the fifth C, that customize recognizes that while emotions and experiences are universal, how it shows up in each person and what each individual needs is very, very different. We certainly didn't want you to walk away thinking that here's the, exact rule book for how to address this. We know that human beings and organizations are not that simple. And so while these hopefully give you some practical best practices, we also acknowledge that there's an element of customization, likely for not only the people on your team, but your organization as well. Cheryl, anything you want to add in terms of a final comment, or should we take a look and see if there are any questions that have popped up?
I'd say let's see if there are any questions. I don't want to spend the time talking if we have questions.
I guess that's my cue. Is that my cue?
Yeah, That's your cue. There you are.
Okay, so we do have a couple of questions that have come in, and one of them always comes up whenever we do this is leadership buy-in. How, what, where? Do you have a magic ball with a question? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, and then Cheryl would love for you to jump in as well. And not surprised. I mean, if you could send them to the webinar, maybe that would convince them. You can send them a recording. But I think a big part of it is doing our best to draw the connection between best practices like the ones that Cheryl and I are talking about and results, right? And we can look at things because those data points speak volumes, even more so than a tree metaphor or a bullet. So a lot of times using some of the metrics that are out there, particularly around engagement scores, we know that building some of these best practices will help your people, feel a stronger sense of engagement in the organization. When they feel engaged, they are more likely to give you maximum contribution and be satisfied by the work that they do. So I would say one surefire way to help make the connection between the importance of what we shared and what your leaders likely want to hear is to draw the line between these best practices and data like engagement scores which lead to business results. The metrics very often will help to build that case. I think, yeah, so Cheryl, before I keep going, let me give you an opportunity to jump in as well.
Yeah, it absolutely has to be tied to business results. And I see a question from Julia. Is there something here that a leader would not buy into? Yes, surprisingly, there's a lot that they wouldn't buy into. It slows down our progress. It creates too much transparency. It puts risk for our leaders because they're being vulnerable and open. When we talk about investing in wellness programs, that takes money. And if they don't see the connection to bottom line business results, then we just don't have the time to invest in that. We don't have the money to invest, especially when we're so focused on becoming more efficient, more streamlined, doing more with less. It's the shareholders that often make those decisions as to whether or not it's something we want to invest in. And so getting that buy-in early is really setting that vision, just like we do with any change effort. We've got to get buy-in from the top. We've got to have sponsorship from top leadership that has the influence that we need to be able to roll this down and say, this is something that we care about. This is something we're going to try and reinforce. Ultimately, it's a culture shift, and culture shifts take a lot of energy and a lot of support from the top. So use your customization to create messaging that leader needs to hear to fully buy into it, to say this is what we're going to do as an organization. And that can be really hard to do, but you can have influence over your team of leaders. If you support business leaders, if you support a function, how can you embed some of these things into your organization and get your leaders buy-in? It doesn't always have to be a full-on culture shift. It can be a team culture shift, specific leaders. So maybe start small and see if you can grow and create some of that pull instead of a push.
Great advice, Cheryl and Leah. And I want to be conscious of time. I do have two questions that hopefully we can get to. One is pretty funny. Matthew wants to know, can you say more about leadership karaoke? I don't know if you have more intel on that, Leah, or not.
Yeah, again, it was, my daughter likes to use the term side quest. So that story was a little bit of a side quest or a side journey around leader communication. And it's just like what it sounds. So this particular bank was going through a transformative effort. And instead of having their leader show up on a formal stage, giving the transformation messaging, a little bit robotic there, if you didn't get the little acting that I did there, they had their leaders from their cars sitting in that very informal space. If you've ever seen carpool karaoke, someone's in the passenger seat and the video is on them and they are just talking very authentically and relatably. And they didn't spend time in their carpool karaoke, going through a slide deck and communicating formal transformation data points. They just shared who they were. They were relatable, and they talked about, what was going on in their personal lives. Just again, sort of taking down that wall and creating that sense of human connection with the employees in their organization. Now, how did that serve them? Well, then in those moments where they do need to communicate tougher messages, where they do need their individuals in their organization to rally behind something that's hard, they now have, created a sense of connection and relatability and authenticity and trust. So they're much more effective in bringing people along and communicating effectively. So really just, I thought, a creative tactic for creating authentic, transparent, empathetic communication. So side quest there for our time.
Thanks, Leah. I know we are at time, but I did see that Mike put a really good piece of information in the chat. So if you're still on, I want to take a look at that. I thought that was really inspiring. But I want to thank you, Leah and Cheryl, for today. It was a great discussion, and I really want to send a big thank you out to everybody who took their time to join us today. We do ask at the end of our session, if you just take a minute to fill out our poll, we love to get your feedback. And I hope you'll join us again on one of our upcoming webinars. So visit GP Strategy's website to view our future sessions, and I wish everyone on today's call a wonderful and productive rest of your day. Thank you very much.
This webinar was brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we help organizations transform through their people. You can access more webinars or download additional resources by visiting the GP Strategies Resource Library. The link is on your screen and in the description.